I've always been a good daughter who helps, who pays, who never complains, taking my role for granted without even questioning whether it's fair. At the age of 32, I am Adelina Capaccio, a marketing specialist at a medium-sized company where I have to work harder than most colleagues to prove my competence. I live alone in a modest rented apartment where everything is in its place. I drive a reliable but aging Honda that should have been replaced long ago, but the costs that fall on my shoulders do not allow me to do this, and for 10 years now I have been financing a family vacation because someone has to. It all started when my parents, Luciana and Vincente, retired early, at the age of 58. They had some savings, but they claimed that they could not afford the luxury of traveling, and I could not bear the thought of them staying at home, envying others who spend their days under the warm sun, basking by the seaside. I have an older sister, Daphne, who is 6 years older than me, is married to Jacob and has 2 children, Umberto, who recently turned 12, and Chiara, 10. She and Jacob have a small printing business, which Daphne describes as successful, but constantly experiencing cash problems, and although I have never gone into details, it seems to me that this permanent, temporary position has become a convenient excuse for her. The first time my family needed help, I didn't even know what it would lead to. It was 10 years ago when my mom called me and, trying to sound as casual as possible, said, "Adeline, dear, we heard that you're going to Florida next month. Dad and I have long dreamed of going, but I'm afraid it's too expensive for us." She froze, waiting for my reaction. I didn't even hesitate before offering to pay for them. It seemed to me that this was a one-time request, that I was just giving them some of the happiness they deserved. But once you agreed, it became a tradition. Every year they expected me to pay for their trip again, and then Daphne and her family joined us. She explained that children needed to see the ocean, that work was exhausting for Jacob, and that parents would feel better if everyone was around. Anyway, it always meant one thing: I paid for extra rooms, food, entertainment, and instead of relaxing, I spent my vacation looking after Umberto and Chiara while Daphne and Jacob went on dates or took my parents to doctors who were found in advance in our neighborhood. You know, business is tight right now, Daphne sighed every time money was mentioned. But I'll pay you back. As soon as I can. She's never done that. Last year was the last straw for me. We went to Branson, and I spent most of my time in a hotel room, listening to my father comment on the weather forecast on the Weather Channel, or shopping with my mother in search of souvenirs, which she then put in a drawer without even bothering to unpack them. It wasn't a vacation, but a routine that I endured only out of a sense of duty. I decided that was enough. I needed a real vacation. Alone. My friend Gemma works as a manager at the Sunset Travel Agency, and I knew she would find something suitable. When I entered her office, she immediately realized that something was wrong. "You look exhausted," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "I need a vacation after my vacation," I replied, flopping into a chair. She smiled knowingly, opened her laptop and asked, "How much are you willing to spend?" I named the amount, and Gemma began to quickly enter the data until her face suddenly lit up with a satisfied smile. "Hawaii," she announced. "A large island. It's not a super popular place, so there aren't many tourists. A small private hotel with only 20 rooms, private access to the beach, hiking trails nearby." She turned on the monitor, and I saw a photo, a simple but elegant white building surrounded by lush greenery, overlooking the ocean. "I'll take it," I said without hesitation. That same night, I booked a flight and a hotel room for 2 weeks, starting on May 15th. For the first time in many years, I felt real excitement. And then the question arose in front of me: should I tell my family? Part of me wanted to just disappear for 2 weeks, leaving only silence, but it seemed childish. They'll understand. After all, adults often go on vacation alone, don't they? The opportunity to tell them came the following Saturday, when, as always, we gathered for a traditional family dinner at my parents' house. Daphne, Jacob, and the kids were already there when I entered the living room. When I arrived, my mother's famous stew filled the house with a familiar aroma that usually made me feel at home, enveloping me in the warmth of childhood memories, but that evening the smell was somehow suffocatingly thick, as if a viscous veil enveloped the kitchen, making the air too heavy. We sat down at the table, and everything went on as usual. My mother complained to the neighbors, reproaching them that the new fence was too high and spoiling her view. My father talked about his golf game, once again describing how he lacked just one accurate shot to win, and Daphne mentioned that it was about Umberto's scientific project, which sounded to me as incomprehensible as any other family discussions in which I was assigned the role of an attentive but silent listener. It was an ordinary family dinner, no different from many previous ones, except that a hurricane of thoughts was raging inside me, which I could no longer contain. During a lull, I took a deep breath, as if about to dive into icy water, and announced, "I've booked a vacation trip to Hawaii next month." As soon as the words left my lips, 5 pairs of eyes immediately turned to me with an expression of sincere curiosity mixed with mild surprise. "Hawaii?" Mom asked, her voice both enthusiastic and incredulous. "That sounds great." She smiled, and for a moment I even thought that everything would go smoothly, but then she added, "When are we going?" I stared at my plate, bracing myself for the next confession, knowing in advance what kind of reaction it would elicit. "Actually, I'm going alone," I finally said, forcing myself to look straight ahead so as not to see my parents' faces fall. This is a small hotel in a secluded location, very peaceful and quiet. There was silence, but not comfortable, but taut, like a tightly twisted spring. His father's fork hit the plate with a thud. "What do you mean, alone?" "What is it?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "I mean just me," I replied, feeling an uneasy tension building inside. "I need some time for myself." Mom's face hardened, her lips pressed into a thin line, as they always did before a storm. "By what right do you think you can leave alone?" "What is it?" she asked sharply, and there was such genuine resentment in her voice that I was momentarily taken aback. "Mom, I'm 30, 2 years old," I tried to explain calmly. "I can decide where to go and with whom." "It's selfish," she hissed, bitterness flashing in her eyes. "After all we've done for you." My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and his voice sounded softer, but there was no less pressure in it. "We haven't been anywhere for a year, Adeline. You know we can't afford that. You should take us with you." I felt my irritation rising, but even then I tried to control myself. "Dad, This is the perfect time." Daphne interrupted me, jumping up from her seat. "Jacob and I can take a 2-week vacation. The kids would love Hawaii." I closed my eyes for a second, gathering my thoughts. They didn't even hear me. They weren't listening. I stood up, feeling a shiver of indignation run down my spine. "I've already decided," I said, looking at them over the table. "I'm going alone. That's what I want. And what I need." Mom screamed, clutching her palm to her chest as if I had just dealt her a fatal blow. "My heart. You're killing your mother with this selfishness." She began to wail, rocking from side to side, as if she really felt sick. "What kind of terrible daughter abandons her parents?" she continued, almost breaking down into tears. "So greedy. Aren't you even going to pay for our vacation?" My father pointed at me with a finger trembling with anger. "You're moving away from your family, Adeline. After all we've sacrificed for you. The children will be devastated." Daphne chimed in, nodding vigorously. They were counting on a summer trip. My head started buzzing, and the walls of the room seemed to slowly spin around me. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, barely holding back tears. "I'm leaving," I said softly. "That's right, run away from your duties." Mom called after me. I drove home in tears, unable to control my emotions. My phone was already buzzing with incoming messages, and it had been going on all night. I turned it off and curled up in bed, exhausted and confused. Was I really being selfish? All I wanted was 2 weeks for myself after years of financing a family vacation. The week after the disastrous dinner was hell. I went to work, returned home, and tried to ignore the continuous stream of messages and calls. Every few minutes, the phone screen would light up, making me feel guilty all over again. I stopped responding after the first day, but it only made the situation worse. By Wednesday, Daphne had gotten our cousins involved, and even our Aunt Carol, who texted me. Your parents are desperate. Family holidays are a tradition. Why would you change it? I couldn't believe how quickly they distorted the whole story. According to them, I was not an adult woman who made a reasonable decision to go on vacation alone. I was a selfish monster who abandoned his family. Next Saturday, I decided to skip the weekly dinner. I needed some space to clear my head. I ordered a takeaway, poured a glass of wine, and was about to turn on the movie when my doorbell rang. Not once, but several times, and not just a bell, but persistently, almost with fury, as if someone was leaning on the button. Through the peephole, I saw my parents and Daphne standing in the hallway. Dad was red with anger, his hands were clenched into fists, and his jaw was clenched tightly, as if he was trying his best to hold back the barrage of accusations that were about to burst from his lips. Mom looked different. Her eyes were swollen and reddened, as if she was really crying, but I knew her too well to immediately believe in the sincerity of these tears. Daphne was standing next to me with her arms crossed over her chest, looking away as if she wasn't there on her own, but I knew that wasn't the case. I thought for a second, maybe I should just not open the door. Pretend that I'm not at home, turn off the lights, show no signs of life, let them stand there until they get tired of themselves and leave. But I knew it wouldn't work. They'd see my car in the parking lot, which meant they knew I was home. Taking a deep breath, I slowly turned the knob and opened the door. So you're hiding from us? Mom said, not giving me a second to respond, and pushed past me into the apartment without even waiting for an invitation. Dad and Daphne followed, and before I could protest, all three of them had already taken over my personal spaces, making themselves too comfortable, as if this were their house and not mine. Mom and Dad sat down on the couch. Mom sighed pointedly, as if I had caused her great suffering, and Daphne remained standing, pacing the space by the window, as if she was going to make an important speech. I stayed where I was, arms crossed over my chest, trying to keep my composure despite my growing irritation. Adeline, Mom began in a trembling voice, cocking her head slightly to one side, as if showing sympathy. You have caused serious psychological trauma to all of us with your selfishness. I didn't have time to say anything, because she immediately continued. The least you can do after all this is pay for us to go where you're going. It would be fair after what you put us through. Actually, Daphne put in, her voice businesslike, the only way you can make it up to me is if you pay for the trip for all of us. Mom, Dad, Jacob, the kids, and me. She paused, watching my reaction carefully, and then, seeing no obvious rejection, she added with a slight emphasis. First-class tickets, obviously, and the best hotel rooms. I felt my jaw drop. Are you serious now? Daphne didn't even flinch. Of course, I'm serious, she replied calmly, as if it wasn't completely absurd, but something completely natural. At that moment, I felt like I was struck by lightning. I suddenly saw clearly that I had been wrong all these years. It was never a concern for me, there was no desire to spend time with me, there was no real family affection. They didn't care that I wanted privacy, that I felt squeezed to the limit, that I just wanted 2 damn relaxing holidays without obligations. All they cared about was my ability to pay for their entertainment. For them, I was not a person, but a living ATM, a reliable source of free vacations and financial support. And all the while, I felt guilty for wanting some space. I felt guilty for hesitating before handing over my credit card. I felt guilty that I dreamed of just lying on the beach with a book instead of looking after my nephews. They used me. You're right, you know, I said slowly, and their expressions instantly changed. Mom's tears dried, her posture straightened, and relief flashed in her eyes. Dad, who had just looked menacing, suddenly softened, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Daphne broke into a smug smile, confident that her arguments had worked. I knew you'd understand, Mom said, patting my hand as if I'd finally realized my mistake and was ready to make amends. You've always been such a good daughter deep down, her father added, nodding contentedly. Daphne was already pulling out her phone. Let me check my calendar, she muttered. We need to make sure that these dates are suitable for us. Adeline, you're only booking first class, right? Jacob's back hurts. He needs more legroom. They kept chatting, discussing my money as if it already belonged to them. As if it was a matter of course. It was as if their behavior was completely normal. I'm going to arrange an unforgettable trip for the family, I said evenly, despite the anger bubbling inside me. After they left, I sat in silence for a long time, allowing myself to realize every emotion, every nuance of the situation, every moment of manipulation in which I have lived for the last 10 years. I should have felt guilty for what I was up to, but instead, for the first time in years, I felt relieved. The next morning, I called the real estate agent and found an apartment on the other side of the city. I posted my deposit on the same day. Over the next few days, I quietly moved the basic items, leaving nothing that could be used against me. I arranged for the mail to be forwarded, and I updated my address at work and at the bank. Meanwhile, my family continued to prepare for their imaginary vacation. Mom sent me photos of new swimsuits. Do you think this one would look good on a beach in Hawaii? Daphne sent photos of the children's suitcases. They're so excited. I replied with thumbs up emoticons and hearts. Each message reinforced this illusion. Every message confirmed that I was making the right decision. 2 days before the scheduled flight, Daphne called me. Her voice sounded casual, as if it was an ordinary call about nothing, just to check if everything was okay with the tickets and the hotel, to check if I had changed my mind, if I had made any mistakes, or maybe just to remind me who here is the main coordinator of this great family adventure. I heard her fake a smile before saying, "Of course I'm not worried, I just wanted to make sure you took care of everything." I replied with the same feigned lightness that everything was fine, that we would meet at the airport on Friday, Terminal B, at 9 in the morning, as agreed. There was a pause that hung in the air for a moment, like a thin thread before breaking up, and then her voice cut through the silence again, this time with a touch of didactic sentimentality. "You know, Adeline, I'm glad you finally understood what family means. How important it is to help each other." I bit my tongue, holding back the words that could come out uncontrollably and then forever remain between us, like debris after an explosion. "And just so you know," she continued, not for a second suspecting how long I was no longer with her, not in this dynamic, not in this role. "I'm already thinking about our Christmas trip. Jacob and I were looking at ski resorts in Colorado. Of course, you'll pay for that too." My fingers gripped the phone so tightly that it almost creaked. "We'll talk about this later," I said through clenched teeth, still calm. "That's great. I'll see you on Friday," she ended the conversation with a satisfied tone, without even giving me a chance to say goodbye. I shook my head in silent disbelief, wondering how deep self-deception could go if nurtured for years. They still haven't figured it out. They still thought they could dictate to me how to live, where to go, what to spend my money on, my energy, my presence. They still believed that my vacation was their privilege. On Friday morning, I woke up at 5, when the sky was still dark and the city lay shrouded in pre-dawn silence. My suitcase was already at the door, neatly packed, as well as the plan was verified to the minute. I ordered a taxi at 6 in order to leave 3 hours before the time when I told my family to come to the airport. When the driver loaded my suitcase into the trunk, I looked back at the apartment, which was almost completely empty. Only the old furniture that had been there before me remained standing as mute witnesses to my transformation. For a moment, I felt a faint stab of doubt, like the bite of an invisible mosquito. Was I acting too radically? Am I burning a bridge that I might want to cross again someday? But then I remembered Daphne's voice, taking it for granted that I would pay for another luxury trip. My mother's theatrical tears surfaced before my eyes, accusing me of betrayal. The memory of my father's dark shadow, casting reproaches from the height of his disappointment, flashed into my mind, and all this mosaic of manipulation, emotional blackmail, and constant guilt for the right to be myself suddenly formed into a clear, unshakable picture. Yes, I was doing the right thing. At the airport, I checked in quickly, almost invisibly, as if everything that was happening was nothing more than an episode from someone else's life, and headed for the boarding gate, enjoying the fact that no one asked, delayed, or tried to force a conversation. In the cabin of the plane, I settled down by the window, feeling a slight tremor of anticipation and nervous excitement spread through my body. When the plane started moving and then soared up, piercing the morning clouds. I closed my eyes and imagined how my family was just getting ready to leave, how they would enter the airport in a couple of hours, looking forward to the rest, how they would stand at Terminal B, becoming more and more impatient, looking around for me. I knew they would call. But my phone was in Do Not Disturb mode, every vibration of which now sounded like a victory. Then they will probably try to register and find out that there are no tickets in their names. This picture unfolding in my mind brought a slight, involuntary smile to my lips. When the plane landed in Kona, and for the first time I breathed in the humid, tropical scented air, which mixed the smell of salt, greenery, and something inexplicably sweet, it seemed to me that I had not just moved to another place, I stepped into a new reality. I was met by a transfer arranged by the hotel, and 40 minutes later we turned off the main road onto a narrow path leading to a secluded spot Gemma had once recommended to me. It turned out to be even more beautiful than in the photos, a small but elegant building surrounded by lush jungle greenery, hidden from prying eyes, with access to a quiet private bay where the sea hugged the sand with gentle insistence. My room was perfect, clean, snow-white linen, simple but cozy bamboo furniture, a spacious bathroom with an ocean view where you could sit for hours listening to the sea whisper. I unpacked my suitcase, put on a light cotton sundress and went to the beach. The sand under my feet was soft and warm, as if it welcomed me. The waves lapped softly, setting the rhythm for a new breath of life. I sat there until sunset, watching as the sky turned golden at first, then bloomed with pink and orange colors, as if someone had poured watercolor on the horizon. No one demanded my attention. No one asked to take pictures of them, complained about the heat, or made any noise. I was just with myself, with the ocean, with the sky, and in that silence I felt like I was returning to my real self. When it got dark, I remembered about the phone. As soon as I turned it on, it exploded with a flurry of notifications, 37 missed calls and more than 60 messages, all from my family. I flipped through them, watching the mood change in their words, from mild confusion to mounting panic, and then rage. Mom, 8:45 a.m., we're here, in Terminal B. Where are you? Dad, 9:12, the front desk says there are no tickets in our names. Give us a call. Immediately. Daphne, 9:30 a.m., this is not funny, Adeline. The kids are worried. Mom, 10:15, I can't believe you could do this to your family. After all we've done for you. The messages became more and more hostile when they finally realized what had really happened, and no one pretended to be caring, offended, or uncomprehending anymore. The masks fell off, and for the first time I saw them in their true form. My father, without wasting time on sentiment, called me ungrateful and heartless, reproaching me for spitting on all the sacrifices made for me and betraying them at the most crucial moment, and my mother, theatrically torn between accusations and sobs, wrote in one of the long angry tirades, "You're dead to me." But the worst of all were the messages from Daphne. Each paragraph, filled with venom, was burning not just with resentment, but with a sincere desire to hurt. She cursed me, wished I would slip off a cliff while walking or drown in the ocean, where "you selfish girl" belong, and reminded me that my nephews were allegedly suffering because their beloved aunt turned out to be a vile liar. Instead of panicking or feeling guilty, which these words were probably trying to provoke, I felt a growing sense of relief, liberating and ruthless, as if something inside me that had been squeezed for years had finally opened. Their rage only confirmed what I had long understood: they didn't love me. They loved the version of me that brought money, comfort, and convenience, the one that bought tickets, booked hotels, stood in the background of family photos with the smile of a man who knows his place. I turned off my phone, feeling the world around me become quieter, and went to the hotel restaurant for dinner, trying to focus on the present and not on the ghosts of the past. The freshly caught fish was cooked so expertly that every bite melted on the tongue, leaving an aftertaste of ocean and lemongrass. I was sitting at a table by the open veranda, watching the moonlight spread over the waves, as silver paths stretched to the horizon, and everything around me seemed like a dream, which, fortunately, was not going to end. This was a real vacation, free from demands, devoid of pressure, built not on compromises, but on self-care. The next 2 weeks turned out to be the island of peace that I had dreamed of for years. I swam in crystal clear water, where every stroke seemed like a movement towards inner harmony. I walked along the path leading to a hidden waterfall, where the stones were warm from the sun and the spray was cool, like a reminder of childhood. I attended yoga classes at dawn, where my breathing blended with the rhythm of the surf, and spent hours under a palm tree reading long postponed books. I became friends with a couple of retired people from Oregon, good-natured and witty, and with a solo traveler from Australia, who talked about his life with such openness, as if we had known each other for 100 years. We met several times for dinner, drank pineapple cocktails and laughed ourselves to tears over stories that contained neither reproaches nor hidden expectations. On the last day, sitting on the beach at dawn, I felt a lightness and calmness that I hadn't known since I was a teenager. I knew that I was not returning to my old life, but to a new one, the one that I had chosen, built and protected. My apartment, though still almost empty, no longer seemed cold. It was waiting for me, like a blank canvas waiting for an artist. Flying home was not the same as flying to Hawaii. If then I was accompanied by a tremor of flight, now I am accompanied by determination and firmness. I was prepared for the consequences. Upon arrival, I took a taxi to my new apartment, which was still simple, just a mattress, a desk, a kettle, and boxes of books. I spent the evening sorting out what I had brought, making a list of necessary things, remembering how long it had been since I had the opportunity to settle in just for myself. And just as I managed to fall asleep, the phone rang. There was a name on the screen that I hadn't expected, Miss Cappuccino, the owner of my old apartment. "Sorry it's so late," she began, her voice shaking. "But there was an incident. Someone sprayed mounting foam on your door. I called the police. It looked like it. Deliberately. I thought you should know." My heart sank. I didn't need to guess. "Check the surveillance cameras," I said. It was probably my sister Daphne or her husband Jacob. They are both in their early 40s. She has shoulder-length brown hair. He has glasses and is balding. They might look angry. "The police are already reviewing the recordings," she confirmed. I gave her a new address, hung up the phone, and sat in silence for a long time. It was a line they had no right to cross. Emotional manipulation is one thing, but now it's property damage, direct aggression. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The next morning, I took a number of drastic steps. First, she changed her phone number, then deleted all her rare social media accounts. I went to my office and had a conversation with the head of security. The stone-faced man listened to me attentively. "I have family problems," I explained calmly. "If someone named Luciana or Vincente Capaccio, or Daphne or Jacob Wilson tries to get into the building or find out where I am, please don't let them through." He nodded, made a note, and promised that everything would be fine. 2 weeks passed in silence. No calls, no emails, no unexpected visits. I began to get used to my new life, to its simplicity, to the rhythm that I chose myself. I bought furniture, furnished the apartment comfortably but discreetly, enrolled in a yoga studio, found time for walks, and even, on Gemma's advice, agreed to a date with a man I met by chance in a coffee shop. Everything was easy, as if old chains had finally crumbled to dust. And then I got a letter from my cousin Wanda. It began calmly. "Adeline, I know about what happened with the trip to Hawaii. Luciana told everyone how you set them up. The important thing went on. I thought you should know. Daphne and Jacob were arrested yesterday. The cameras capture them spraying foam all over the door of your old apartment. They were fined for vandalism and ordered to pay damages." The last line sounded better. "Your parents tell everyone that you humiliated them. I'm sorry that things got so terrible. If you need anything, let me know. Love. Wanda." I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to catch, recognize, and realize what kind of feeling was fighting in me for the right to be named. Sadness, anger, guilt, everything seemed both true and false at the same time, and at the same time none of it really resonated inside, as if emotions they evaporated, burned to the ground after many years of grunge. I didn't feel anything, just silence, thick, almost ringing, like after thunder. It wasn't emptiness, no, rather liberation, as if the wound that had been festering in a secluded, unlit place of my mind had finally been opened, washed to the point of pain, and now it had to heal. The pain was real, but necessary, not the one that cripples, but the one that leads to healing. For too long, my family, which was supposed to be a bulwark of support, looked at me not as a person, not as a daughter, sister, or niece, but as a convenient and reliable resource, an ATM with a babysitter function that finances someone's desires, hiding behind slogans of love and devotion. When I stopped fulfilling my usual role, their interest in me as a person dried up, as if I had lost my only purpose in their eyes. I brewed myself a cup of green tea, wrapped myself in a blanket with a practiced movement, sat down on my sofa, which still smelled of new fabric, and immersed myself in thoughts about the path that led me to this point. Just 3 months ago, the idea that I would cut off ties with all my closest relatives seemed to me not just impossible, blasphemous, treacherous, and now this thought was not only a reality, but also a source of peace. I've been in a vicious circle of guilt, commitment, and self-denial for so long that I've stopped noticing how toxic and ugly it all became. And only now, having escaped, I could breathe deeply. The next day at the office, my boss, Mary Ann, looked at me attentively during her weekly meeting, held her gaze a little longer than usual and said with a slight smile, "You seem like a different person after your vacation, Adeline. More focus, more confidence." I smiled back softly and confessed, "I've made some difficult but very necessary changes in my personal life." She nodded, as if she had expected this answer, and, turning her head busily to her laptop, added, "Actually, I was going to talk to you about the position of Senior Marketing Specialist. She's being released next month. I think you should apply." 6 months ago, such an offer would have caused me excitement, anxiety, and a lot of excuses about how I would not be able to combine work with solving endless family problems. And now all I felt was calm determination. "I'd love to," I replied. On the evening of the same day, a new letter from Wanda was waiting in the mail. She asked if I wanted to meet up for coffee on the weekend. Her tone was light and friendly, and I was really pleased to know that not all family ties had fallen apart, that at least one thread remained that was not tainted by demand, manipulation, or blackmail. Wanda has always been distinguished by calm, reasonable kindness. She never asked for money, did not expect gifts, did not condemn my choice, and did not try to get into my life uninvited. We met at a small cafe near my apartment on Saturday morning. She appeared in a camel-colored coat, with her usual neat hairstyle and a latte cup in her hands. "You look good," she said, sitting down across from him, "really good." I nodded, "I am." I became happier. It was just the first time I recognized how bad it was. She lowered her eyes, stroked the napkin on the table. "Family gossip about you. Let's just say they're pretty tough. Aunt Luciana tells me that you promised them a luxury trip, and then at the last moment abandoned them at the airport, as if in some kind of malicious joke. Uncle Vincente focused on all the moments when they supported you growing up." I smiled a little ironically. It's convenient to forget about the decade during which I supported them, and also Daphne. Wanda nodded and sighed. "Daphne is Daphne," she began, but I finished for her. "Yes. She and Jacob are furious. Because of the fines they had to pay. They say I set them up somehow." I shook my head, not so much in outrage as in amazement. "They ruined my door. Their faces are on camera footage. How could I have set this up?" Wanda smiled a little sadly. "You know they've never taken responsibility for anything. It's easier for them to blame you." We chatted for almost an hour more, slowly, warmly, remembering childhood, sharing plans, telling the little things of everyday life. When it was time to leave, she lingered at the door of the cafe, lightly squeezing my hand. "They say they're done with you completely. But the truth is, I think they're just waiting for you to crawl back in. When you get lonely. When you need a family. They're sure you'll apologize first." I pressed my lips together, considering her words. "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then I think we'll all find out if they meant it." She nodded. "You did the right thing. It was unhealthy. The way they treated you." The following week settled into a steady rhythm. I plunged into my work, plunging headlong into preparing for a promotion interview, step by step building a life in which, for the first time, I was the center, and not the constant needs of my family, as in some bottomless well. My bank account, always suffering from the endless financing of other people's trips, repairs, and emergencies, began to grow slowly but steadily. The weekend became my own, not filled with obligatory family dinners and spine-chilling phone calls, but with walks, books, movies, yoga classes, and quiet joys. I got a promotion. I went on another date with a kind, funny architect named Michael, who spoke warmly and listened attentively. I bought new furniture, light, airy, and light. I painted the walls sky blue, a shade I've always loved, but which my mother called too cold, too sterile. He was my choice now. 6 months after that fateful trip to Hawaii, which became the watershed between my old, worn-out life and a new, still fragile, but already stable reality in its own way, I received a message from Wanda. She invited me to her son's birthday, a modest family holiday in a country house, where, as she said, she hastened to assure me that neither Daphne nor my parents were going to. I hesitated, rereading the invitation several times, as if hoping to find between the lines another confirmation that I would really be welcome there, that this was not a trap, not a rigged moment of reconciliation in which I would again find myself at the extreme, again guilty of something I did not commit. Wanda felt my doubt. Some of the cousins will, yes, she wrote, but they have already listened to both sides and can form their own opinion. You deserve to be part of a family where you are respected. From the very beginning, the party was shrouded in a slight tension, like it happens in the air before a thunderstorm, when the sky is still bright, but breathing is already becoming cautious. Cousin Steve, always calm and polite, now avoided even fleeting eye contact, as if he was afraid that my gaze would reveal doubt in him or, worse, guilt. His wife, Eleanor, was whispering something to her friend, casting sidelong glances in my direction, and although I didn't hear a word, I knew this language, the language of unspoken accusations disguised as polite curiosity. But Aunt Carol, with whom I always felt a strange affinity, as if there was an invisible thread of understanding between us, warmly hugged me, holding the hug a little longer than required by decency. And Uncle Phil behaved as if nothing had happened in the past months, the same jokes, the same habit of patting on the shoulder, as if he wanted to remind, "You're your own, don't forget." By the end of the evening, when the children got tired and started acting up, when the adults moved to the dessert table and the conversations became less tense, when laughter, albeit a little strained, began to spread through the house, the tension dissipated. It didn't disappear at all, but it receded, leaving behind the usual dynamics of a large family, with its gossip, quiet dramas, but also a sincere desire to be together. When I was about to leave, Aunt Carol came up to me and, taking my arm, led me aside to a quiet corner of the living room, where an old gramophone stood surrounded by dusty photographs. "I should have said something years ago," she said, and her voice sounded almost like a confession. "They treated you wrong. We took advantage of your kindness, your desire to be needed. We all saw it, but we didn't say anything." I swallowed, barely able to contain my emotions. "Why didn't you say anything then?" I asked, knowing the answer but unable to accept it. "Family politics," she sighed. "No one wanted to cause a drama. The usual excuses." "I'm sorry, Adeline." I nodded, accepting her apology, but not completely letting go of the part of me that had been waiting for these words for so long, words of recognition, words that were not enough to heal, but which could be the beginning of forgiveness. "Have you heard from them lately?" she asked, and I immediately knew who she meant. "Your parents are experiencing financial difficulties, although they will never admit it. And Daphne and Jacob haven't shared something again. The business is bursting at the seams. They tried to borrow from Steve last month." I felt a fleeting wave of unease, as if my instinct was still clinging to my old role as a savior, but then I reminded myself, they are adults, independent people able to make decisions, and bear the consequences for them. Their troubles were no longer my burden. That night, I lay in my bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling illuminated by the soft glow of a street lamp, and thought about how much had changed in less than a year. I turned from a convenient walking ATM, from an emotional filter for other people's problems, into a person who builds his life on his own terms. It was a difficult path, full of doubts, loneliness, and memories that I wanted to hide from, but it led to freedom. Yes, sometimes the pain still made itself felt, like a ghostly longing for a family that I never had, but which I, like everyone else, probably dreamed of having. But now this pain was like an old, lingering wound, not threatening, not all-consuming, but just part of my experience. There was no more panic when looking at a bank account after a visit from relatives. There were no more vacations turned into a hell of endless demands. There were no more painful evenings spent rehearsing answers to future accusations. I was free. After receiving a Christmas card from Wanda the following week with a warm note and an invitation to their traditional New Year's Eve party, I put it on the mantelpiece with a smile. Michael, whom I continue to date, offered to spend Christmas with his family. He was sincere, did not impose, just wanted to share the warmth of his home. My book club, which I joined in the fall, was already planning a gift exchange at the December meeting. Life seemed to be going on as usual, but this turn was new, healthy, belonging to me. Standing at the window, watching the light snow cover the street with a thin, crystal blanket, I suddenly realized I hadn't thought about my parents or Daphne in days. The sharp pain of their betrayal turned into an occasional tingle, nothing more. I no longer checked my email with a lump in my throat, did not expect messages that made my heart sink into my heels, did not rehearse defensive speeches in my mind. I was free, not only from financial pressure, but also from the emotional ballast that had been a part of me for so long, a part that I took for granted. In my quiet, warm apartment, surrounded by the things I chose myself, I realized for the first time clearly, family is not blood and not inherited duties, but respect, care and love. All the things I've never had with my parents and sister. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.